Hi, I'm Dave Vickers and welcome to the Photo Show. Now, it would be amiss for me not to mention what's happening in the world in this current situation. I'm filming this on the 26th of March from the UK. I'm based in London. We're currently on lockdown here, have been since Monday, as many countries across the world are. And I hope everyone out there is staying as safe and well as possible. Now, one of the strange things about these strange times that we're in is that people have got some spare time. And now with lockdown and people having to stay at home, people have got time to possibly try things that they haven't tried before or learn something new. So over the next few episodes, I'm going to put together just a very basic beginner's photographic course. If you're new to photography, if you're a kid who's at home off school and likes photography, or if you're someone that's been into photography for a while but you tend to shoot in auto and you'd like to learn more about how to use your camera and get the most out of it, this is going to be ideal for you. We're going to start from the absolute beginning, make it absolutely basic. What I'd also like to do is, if you have any questions about photography or anything that's in each episode, leave it in the comments below and I'll try and answer as many as I can, and possibly what we'll do is we'll make other videos to answer those questions. Now, one of the aims of this is to get you to understand photography and how it works. I'm guessing that most of you at some point have learned to drive a car, and now you get into your car and you don't even think about the process of how it works. And I'm going to try and do exactly the same for you with your camera, to get you to a point where you can use your camera without even really thinking about the processes that you need to go through. If you took the keys to someone else's car and got in it, you'd be able to make it go forwards, backwards, stop, start, left and right without even thinking about it. You might not be able to tune the radio, but you would know the basics of how it works. And photography is exactly the same. If you learn a few basic things, you'll be able to pick up any camera at any time, set it up and be able to get the photographs you want. So in this first episode, I'm basically just going to explain what a camera is and how it works and how you use it to take photographs. Now, at its most basic, photography is just recording light to create an image. If you can remember that, everything else will start to make sense from there on. What you're doing is you're recording light onto the sensor to create an image. In fact, the word photography is made up of two separate words: photo, which means light, and graph, which means drawing. So the basic term for photography is light drawing. Okay, so what is a camera? Now, the name camera originates from Latin, and it actually originally came from a thing called a camera obscura. And these were basically dark rooms with a pinhole in the side that allowed light through, and an image would be projected on the opposite wall. In Latin, camera means room, obscura means dark. So the word camera obscura literally means dark room. Modern camera is a very similar thing. It's a light tight box that allows a selected amount of light into it to record an image. So let's have a look at a few different types of cameras, and I'll show you exactly what each part does in the process of creating photographs. Okay, to start this off, just to explain things, I've put together a collection of 4 different cameras here. We have a KODAK folding BROWNIE from the 1920s. We have a NIKON SLR film camera from the 1980s. We have a digital camera from the 2010s, and we have a fairly up-to-date smartphone. So at first glance, there looks like there's quite a difference between these cameras. In reality, there's very little difference between the KODAK film camera from the 1920s at this end and the smartphone or the digital camera from the 2010s at this end. The process they use to take the photograph is exactly the same. The only difference between these two cameras and these two cameras is how the image is stored. On the KODAK and the NIKON SLR, they were film cameras, so the recording medium for both of those was light-sensitive film. On the digital camera and the mobile phone, both of those will use an image sensor and a memory system to store the images. But the process of how all these types of cameras actually work is exactly the same. There is very little difference apart from the storage medium from the 1920s film camera to the modern smartphone camera. Now, as I was saying, all of the cameras operate in a very similar way. So I'm going to use the DSLR from the 2010s, which will give us an idea of how cameras work. And the processes and techniques that you use for this camera would be exactly the same for the processes and techniques you'd use from a camera from over 100 years ago. At the front of the camera here, we have the lens. And the job of the lens is to focus light coming into the camera to produce a sharp image. Now, a lens is basically a tube with some glass elements inside it that focus the light coming in to produce a sharp image at the other end. Also within the lens, we have what's called the aperture ring. And the aperture ring is a set of leaves that can open and close to give a larger or smaller hole or aperture. And that controls the amount of light that is allowed through the lens, which is focusing the light, to reach the sensor. The lens at the front of the camera has two functions. It focuses the light coming in to give a sharp image, and it also has an aperture ring that allows you to control the amount of light that is coming through the lens into the camera. And hopefully this isn't getting too confusing, but what we're going to do in future episodes is break down each of these parts so you understand in more detail. So in the next episode we'll be looking at aperture, and that will start to make more sense. But for now, the lens has glass elements that focus the light and an aperture ring that controls the amount of light that goes through it. Next in line you have what's called your shutter. Now your shutter is there to control the light reaching the sensor. So aperture controls the amount of light that's coming through the lens. The shutter controls the amount of time that light reaches the sensor. All these processes are exactly the same as whether you're using a modern digital camera or a 100-year-old film camera. The light will come through a lens, through an aperture, reach a shutter. The shutter will open and close to allow the light to reach the recording medium. Just after your shutter, you'll have your image sensor. Now an image sensor is an electronic device that records light. Covering the sensor are millions of tiny little elements called pixels, which will record either red, green or blue light. And by combining these coloured pixels on the sensor, we can get millions of colours recorded to record your image. Now here is the only difference between this camera and our 1920s folding camera. Everything else up to this point is exactly the same. The only thing that's different is the recording medium. In the modern digital camera, here you have your image sensor. In an older camera, you would have had a light sensitive film. So up until this point, everything else is exactly the same between a modern digital camera and a camera from 100 years ago. The light comes in through the lens, is controlled by the aperture, the amount of time that the light reaches your recording medium is controlled by your shutter, and then you have your recording medium, be it film or be it an image sensor, but the process is exactly the same. So in a modern digital camera, there is one more stage that's required over an older film camera. In a film camera, the film was both the recording and the storage medium. The light sensitive film would record the light that's come through the lens, past the aperture, past the shutter, onto the film, and it would be recorded on the film, and once it was developed, it was stored as a negative on the film. The same thing was both the recording medium and your storage medium. On a modern digital camera, you have your image sensor, which is your recording medium, and then you have a memory card, which is your storage medium. So the information that's recorded by the sensor is then stored onto the memory card for you to retrieve later on. So let's do one more quick recap on how a camera actually works. At the front you have your lens, which has glass elements that focus the light. The focused light coming through the lens is controlled by your aperture ring within the lens, which can be opened or closed to regulate the amount of light coming through. Then it reaches your shutter, which is like a set of doors that are closed, blocking the light off. When you push your shutter button, the shutter opens and closes for a specific amount of time, allowing the light, which has been focused by the lens, controlled by the aperture, through to reach the sensor to record the image. That is the basis of how all cameras work, film or digital. They work in exactly the same way. And if you can start to understand the process of how you use your aperture and how you use your shutter speed to control the amount of light reaching your sensor, and that is photography at its absolute basics. It is recording light to create an image. Okay, hopefully there I've managed to explain how a camera actually works. In the next episode, we'll look at aperture and shutter speed in more detail and explain how you use those to control the light that comes through the lens, past the shutter, onto the sensor to start taking the type of photographs that you want to take. For now, I'm Dave Vickers, this is The Photo Show. Please stay safe and well, and we'll see you in the next episode.